Today on the Matt Walsh Show, the left is in mourning after a convicted murderer guilty of brutally stabbing a woman to death was executed. They have spun up a bunch of false narratives alleging that the man was innocent. But why are they coming to his defense, and why do they care so much about some criminal on death row, but they don't care about other criminals in death row? Well, we'll discuss. Also, Kamala Harris sits down for her first solo interview since she stole the nomination, and she embarrasses herself as expected. Plus, a couple of pastors and the guy who created Veggie Tales are the latest Christians, quote unquote, to come out against my new movie. I'll respond to that. All of that and more today on The Matt Walsh Show. The most consequential election of our lifetimes is 39 days away. The mainstream media won't tell you the truth, but we will. At Daily Wire Plus, we cut through the lies and deliver real, unfiltered news every day. Join us as we fight the left and build the future. dailywire.com/subscribe. With the Federal Reserve dropping interest rates mid last week, it's time to make a smart financial move and call my friends at American Financing today. With mortgage rates now in the fours, yes, the fours, now's the perfect time to consolidate your debt and reduce your monthly expenses. Let's be honest, a lot of us have been forced to use credit cards because of the ridiculous prices at the grocery store, on power bills, even for childcare. It's getting out of hand. That credit card debt, it's not just expensive, it's insanely expensive. But here's the good news. With mortgage rates dropping, now's the time to wipe that debt out. American Financing is helping homeowners just like you save over $800 a month on average. It's real money you could be using to, actually enjoy your life a little. Imagine that. They're even closing some loans in as fast as 10 days. And if you start today, you may be able to delay 2 mortgage payments, 2 whole payments, plus there are no upfront fees. To find out how much you could save, no fees at all, none, zero, zilch. So here's what you need to do. Call American Financing today at 866-569-4711. That's 866-569-4711. Or if you're more digitally inclined, visit americanfinancing.net/Walsh. NMLS 182334, NMLSconsumeraccess.org. APR for rates in the 4 start at APR 5.672% for well-qualified borrowers. Call 866-569-4711 for details about credit costs and terms. On the day of August 11th, 1998, a lifelong criminal named Marcellus Williams was looking for a house to rob in a gated community in University City, Missouri. Now, by that point, Williams already had several prior criminal convictions, including for robbery and burglary. He shouldn't have been on the streets at all, but apparently a judge let him out of jail so that he could commit more crimes and victimize more people. And that's exactly why he was in University City on August 11th. When Marcellus Williams knocked on the door of a home owned by a 42-year-old journalist named Felicia Gale, nobody answered. So Williams broke a window and let himself in. And he noticed that someone on the second floor was taking a shower. So Williams went downstairs to the kitchen, grabbed a butcher knife, and waited. And when Gale emerged from the shower, Marcellus Williams stabbed her 43 times, including 7 separate fatal wounds. He then stole Gale's purse and her husband's laptop before leaving the house to pick up his girlfriend. Now, immediately, his girlfriend noticed something was wrong. Williams' shirt was bloody. His neck was scratched. Inexplicably, there was also a new laptop in his car. The next day, Williams' girlfriend noticed a purse in the trunk that contained Felicia Gale's identification card. So she confronted Williams about this, and he admitted that he had just murdered a woman. He threatened to kill his girlfriend if she went to the police. Then a few months later, Williams was incarcerated for an unrelated crime. This is the theme in this guy's life, after all. He's constantly in prison because he's constantly committing serious crimes. In this particular instance, when Williams was in jail, he promptly bragged to another inmate that he had murdered Felicia Gale and provided non-public information about the killing. In other words, he provided information he could not have known unless he was there. When that inmate got out of jail, he went to the police department and told them what he had heard. During their investigation, detectives spoke to Marcellus Williams' girlfriend, who confirmed that he had confessed to the murder. Police also found several items belonging to the victim in the Buick that Marcellus Williams was driving, as well as the stolen laptop belonging to the victim's husband. On these facts, Marcellus Williams was convicted by a jury and sentenced to death. On appeal, Williams' attorney raised several objections, most of which were technical in nature. But there were a couple of claims that related to his guilt or innocence. Specifically, Williams said that the jury should have been given the opportunity to determine that he was a mere accomplice to the murders as opposed to the actual killer. That's because, according to the defense, several unidentified hairs and shoe prints were found at the murder scene. Additionally, Williams' girlfriend was supposedly seen with a laptop computer after Williams was incarcerated. But these arguments weren't convincing to the Supreme Court of Missouri. For one thing, there was evidence showing that several workmen and hundreds of guests had been inside the home in the months prior to the murder, so you'd expect to have some unidentified shoe prints and hairs lying around. Additionally, Marcellus Williams told both his girlfriend and the inmate that he was alone when he committed the murders. And finally, there was no evidence that Williams' girlfriend possessed the same laptop computer that was stolen from the murder scene. She just had a laptop, any laptop. Now, if you tune into any mainstream media coverage of Marcellus Williams' case, you won't hear any of the details I just outlined, all of which are undisputed and come directly from the Supreme Court of Missouri. You won't hear news anchors recount all of the ways in which it's clear that Marcellus Williams is extremely guilty of murder. He is guilty of randomly killing a woman, butchering her to death for no reason. He's very guilty of that, proved beyond a shadow of a doubt. But you won't hear that. Instead, you'll find emotional segments like this one, which just aired on CNN. Watch.
Tonight, a Missouri man has been executed by the state, but a deeply unsettling question remains. Was Marcellus Williams innocent? He was accused of killing Felicia Gale in 1998, but a re-examination of evidence raised questions about whether he actually did it. After years of investigations and hearings, Missouri Governor Mike Parson stepped in this year and ordered the execution to move forward. Now, that was despite prosecutors, Williams's family, and even the family of Gale pleading to spare Williams's life. Now, that did not happen. And tonight, a last-ditch appeal to the Supreme Court was rejected with the 6-3 vote falling along ideological lines. A devout, practicing Muslim, Williams' last words were, "All praise be to Allah in every situation." The man's last meal, chicken wings and tater tots. And at 7:01 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, Marcellus Williams was given the lethal injection of the sedative pentobarbital, and 9 minutes later, he was pronounced dead.
Oh, it's a tragedy. One of the worst human beings on earth was executed. Someone who, all the people mourning him, none of them would want to live next door to this guy. You know why? Because you don't want him breaking into your house and stabbing you 43 times. Because you all know exactly that's exactly what he did. And by the way, all of these morons saying he's innocent, they're not just saying he shouldn't be executed. They're calling for him to be released from prison. That's what they wanted. Now it's too late. Now he's dead. But they wanted him released to do it again, which is exactly what he would do. They just want him released into someone else's community. Not mine. I don't want him in my community, but someone else's. The anchor focuses on reinforcing the current BLM narrative that Marcellus Williams' execution was unjust. And to that end, she talks about how prosecutors and the victim's family didn't want to see Williams killed. She implies he might even be innocent. She barely even mentions the woman who was brutally stabbed 43 times in her own kitchen or the mountain of damning evidence in the case. So let's take both of those claims in turn. First of all, the prosecutor that the CNN anchor is referring to is a restorative justice activist named Wesley Bell. Bell was not the original prosecutor on the case, which was tried more than 20 years ago. He parachuted in at the last moment in defiance of the state's attorney general to try to delay Williams's execution. Now, earlier this year, Bell claimed in court filings that DNA evidence might exonerate Williams. Specifically, there was supposedly unknown DNA on the murder weapon. But that claim fell apart in recent weeks. According to the Missouri Judicial Branch, attorneys, quote, received a report indicating the DNA on the murder weapon belonged to an assistant prosecuting attorney and an investigator who had handled the murder weapon without gloves prior to the trial. So there was no unknown DNA on the murder weapon after all. This month, a court in Missouri looked into what exactly happened with the handling of this murder weapon. They determined that back in 2001, it was normal practice for detectives in St. Louis to handle evidence without wearing gloves after the crime lab had processed the item and determined that there was no useful DNA or fingerprints evidence on it. And in this case, because the killer wore gloves, there was no usable evidence on the knife. So the detectives and prosecutors repeatedly handled the knife as part of the trial preparation because they figured there's nothing on the knife that is relevant. Nothing about that in any way suggests that the knife was tampered with or that there might have been another killer. None of that means that DNA evidence exonerated him, which is what these morons are out there saying on Twitter. He was exonerated by DNA evidence. No, he wasn't. You're either lying or stupid. Which is it? And that is why the court upheld the conviction. As the state attorney general put it, one of the defense's own experts previously testified that he could not rule out the possibility that Williams's DNA was also on the knife. He could only testify to the fact that enough actors had handled the knife throughout the legal process that others' DNA was present. That attorney general emphasized that the other available evidence was very clear. Quote, the victim's personal items were found in Williams's car after the murder. A witness testified that Williams had sold the victim's laptop to him. Williams confessed to his girlfriend and an inmate in the St. Louis County Jail, and Williams' girlfriend saw him dispose of the bloody clothes worn during the murder. This is overwhelming evidence, obviously. Okay? It's actually impossible to imagine any scenario where all of those things could have happened, and yet he's innocent. And if you read between the lines, even this new prosecutor concedes that. In recent court filings and in his interview with CNN, the prosecutor didn't even claim that Williams was necessarily innocent. Instead, he pointed to alleged defects in how the trial was conducted, including jury selection. Here's part of the prosecutor's interview with CNN.
You have to wonder why there was such a vested interest in the speed of this. After this was a murder from decades ago at this point in time, now that this was underway, why do you think there was the haste to do so? Given your office said no, the victims' families said no, he was not asking to be released. He wanted time to investigate further and was even willing to plead guilty to lesser charges, which I might add, there were people who said, well, hold on, that must mean that he's probably guilty. What's your response to that?
What he was willing to agree to was called an Alfred plea, as you know, which he is not pleading guilty to the charges. He's acknowledging that there's enough evidence to convict him. But that was really for us to be able to buy time to be able to investigate his claims of innocence because the execution date was set. If the execution date was stayed or just pushed back a few months to give us more time to investigate this matter, we may have been able to determine whether or not he was in fact innocent or not. But as you know, it's not just about innocence. It's also about the integrity of the conviction.
Right.
These people are so despicable. You can barely even look at them. They're so disgusting. People die every day in this country, you know, innocent people, children. They die at the hands of people like Marcellus Williams. But these news anchors and that activist prosecutor there that we just saw, they never muster any of that emotional energy for any of the people. I mean, hundreds of people dying, thousands of people dying every day. They have no feeling about almost any of that. And then an absolute murdering, multiply convicted scumbag is executed, and that's what they can barely even talk about it. They're so emotional. So this is an incredible moment. They're both claiming that Marcellus Williams was executed too hastily more than 25 years after he killed a woman in her own kitchen. This crime was committed during the Clinton administration. And it's too hasty, too fast, apparently. We just need another 25 years to really investigate this case. See if we can find some new information. He had 25 years to prove that actually it's a false conviction. Couldn't do it in 25 years. Not enough time. If he had only had more time, then magically the innocence fairy would have flown into his cell and sprinkled some innocence dust on him, and then that's what he needed. Maybe some new witnesses would turn up. Maybe we'll find new surveillance footage. Who knows? Apparently the point is, even after you're convicted, you get 50 more years to prove that you're really innocent. At least that's what you get if BLM and the corporate press think that they can turn you into a martyr. So if you're a white guy on death row, then you don't get that benefit. Nobody cares. You know, you'll notice that the only condemned criminals that anyone ever cries over are black. Plenty of white guys get put to death too. But they never become a trendy cause for the media and activists. I wonder why. Anyway, as you just heard, the other argument that they're using is that people connected to the victim supposedly don't want this man to be executed. Again, that isn't a claim that's related to whether Marcellus Williams killed someone or not. It's an argument about what the family wants. But if you look closer into this claim, that falls apart too. Here's part of a letter written last month by Laura Friedman, who's now married to the victim's former husband. Quote, after 26 years of competing court filings, secret commissions, TV news alerts, and front-page headlines, my husband's personal pain is once again the subject of public discussion and debate. This is now the 5th time this family tragedy has been revisited, relitigated, and reappeared in the press. We are exhausted and exasperated. Whether the death penalty is deserved in a case like this is a matter for debate. Williams's guilt is not. So notice what's actually going on here. Laura Friedman emphatically says that Marcellus Williams is guilty. She is speaking on behalf of the victim's husband, who's now her husband. That is the closest person to the victim. And he says he's guilty. The media just ignores that part. She also says that she just wants this case to be over so that the family can get some closure. They're tired of how activists have dragged this case out for more than 25 years. Media ignores that part too. Instead, the story for the mainstream media is that the family and loved ones close to the victim supposedly don't want the death penalty. And it's not true. Let me ask you, if you care so much about the victims, how do you think it makes them feel? If you care so much about the victim's family, how do you think the victim's family feels when they see you dirtbags on TV crying your crocodile tears for the man that killed their family member? When you're rallying in support of the man that butchered their family member and killed her in her own house? You think the victim's family, you think they're happy about that? You think that makes them feel good? You think that helps them heal? No, you don't care about the victim's family. You don't give a damn about the victim's family. As far as you're concerned, they could have been killed too. Doesn't matter to you. All you care about is Marcellus Williams because he's a black criminal, and so you can make him into a martyr. That's the only thing you care about. Only thing. So these are the lies that are underpinning the latest attempt by race hustlers to manufacture another George Floyd scenario. For example, Henry Rogers, a.k.a. Ibram X. Kendi, wrote, quote, tonight, Missouri lynched Marcellus Williams. DNA evidence proved he was innocent. It didn't matter because the United States is a serial killer of black people. Just total, not a complete lie. Everything about that is a lie. DNA proved he's innocent. No, it didn't. Total lie. For her part, Cori Bush, who just lost her primary to Wesley Bell, also called Williams innocent and said his death was depraved. You know what I would like them to do? I wish they would have said, okay, all right, we'll release him from jail, Cori Bush. He's living with you now. How about that? He'll be your room. You care so much about this poor innocent man. All right, we'll let him out. We'll put him in your. He'll be your roommate now. We'll check back in a week. See how that turned out. The NAACP had a similar message, quote, tonight, Missouri lynched another innocent black man. Governor Parson had the responsibility to save this innocent life, and he didn't. The NAACP was founded in 1909 in response to the barbaric lynching of black people in America. We were founded exactly because of people like Governor Parson who perpetuate violence against innocent black people. So there are a lot of statements like this from every BLM activist and race hustler that you'd expect. Mainstream media organizations are saying much the same thing. They're claiming that there's no difference between executing a man convicted of a brutal homicide and who clearly did commit that brutal homicide and lynching a random black person who's done nothing wrong. If these people had any degree of intelligence or integrity whatsoever, they'd recognize how degrading that is, by the way, to black people who haven't committed any crimes. They're being equated with a career felon who killed a woman for no reason. Now, the only lesson we can draw from this is that the NAACP, Henry Rogers, and corporate media don't believe that black people should get the death penalty when they murder a white person. They probably don't think any punishment is appropriate at all, frankly, because because of how they're lying about the death of Felicia Gale. We're witnessing crass race hatred spilling out into the open. We all know that if Marcellus Williams were white, or if his victim had been black, there wouldn't be any outrage whatsoever. I mean, this is the clearest imaginable example of a manufactured racial narrative. And of course, it's happening in an election year. And it's riling up all the lunatics you'd expect. In one post that has hundreds of thousands of views on X, an activist wrote, quote, "The murder of Marcellus Williams is connected to the murder of the people of Palestine and the people in Haiti and the people in Lebanon and the people in, let your grief move you to see this as part of one state-approved project." Yes, Marcellus Williams is connected to the people of Palestine and Haiti and Lebanon. Somehow. Now, as deranged as this post is, it does have a shred of honesty in it. The truth is that nobody campaigning on behalf of Marcellus Williams actually thinks he's innocent. If a woman is brutally murdered and you confess to the crime to multiple people, you give them details that you wouldn't have known unless you'd been there, and you're found with the victim's property in your car, then you're guilty. Period. It is, again, basically impossible to even conceive of a possible scenario where all of that could happen, and yet you're still innocent. Come up with a fantasy scenario where a woman could be murdered, and then you have a guy who's totally unconnected to the murder, who happens to be seen with bloody clothes on the same day, happens to confess to that murder and know things about it that haven't been reported to the police, and also happens to have the property of the victim in his car, and yet he didn't do it. Piece that one together. What's your theory of the crime if it's not Marcellus Williams? Well, you have no theory because you know Marcellus Williams is guilty. He did it. He brutally butchered an innocent woman. He deserves to die for what he did. I'm glad he died for what he did. The world's a better place without him. And it's justice. And it's that simple. But none of the activists really care about the facts of this case or even about Marcellus Williams himself. These, after all, are not empathetic people. These are not people who value human life. Millions of human children have been killed by abortion in this country, and these people not only don't care about that, but celebrate it. They apparently feel infinitely more sympathy for a convicted murderer who stabbed a woman 40 times than they do for 60 million dead children combined. So, how could anyone's heart be that twisted? How could their sympathies be so wildly, psychotically misdirected? Well, because they actually have no sympathy at all for anyone. It's all a show. It's an act. These are sociopaths. And this is about a much larger effort to undermine and ultimately destroy the rule of law in the United States. And this effort is being undertaken by people who care far more about Haiti and Lebanon than they care about this country. That's why they're trivializing the murder of this young white journalist in Missouri. That's why they're mocking her family and pretending her killer is innocent. Only the most dysfunctional hellholes on the planet have explicit, distinct standards of justice depending on the skin color of the assailant and the skin color of the victim. And after this surreal and delusional effort to absolve Marcellus Williams, it's clear that we're much closer to becoming one of those hellholes than we might like to admit. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. Attention men who still believe in the American dream. In a world gone mad, the Precision 5 razor from Jeremy's Razor stands as a beacon of sanity. I hold it now in my hand. It's even more beautiful in person than it looks on the screen. 5 blades of superior engineering offer a shave as unshakable as your faith that the nation's best days still lie ahead. Experience an exceptionally smooth, remarkably close shave and a testament to the fact that merit still matters. Stop giving your money to woke corporations that hate you. Get Jeremy's Razors Precision 5, available now at jeremysrazors.com, walmart.com, and Amazon Prime. Kamala had her first solo sit-down interview yesterday. She gets no credit, of course, for finally sitting down by herself she's like a big girl. She's on her own now, so grown up. But she gets no credit for that because it took her 2 months, and because she's sitting down with one of her supporters on MSNBC. Just to give you the flavor of the interview, to give you an idea of the level of questioning that she was confronted with. This is the closest thing that the interviewer got to doing any kind of sort of fact check. Let's watch this.
The first one, just a fact check, because your opponent almost
no little
every
job.
day. Okay,
There's no such thing as a little job.
Okay, fair. Because your opponent almost every day seems to be talking about this. So I just want to ask you, yes or no. At any point in your life, have you served 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun, working out at McDonald's? Yes or no? That's it.
I have.
Okay, now the other job.
But it was not a small job. Like, I did the fries. I mean,
Hard-hitting stuff. She did the fries, she tells us. And she definitely didn't, by the way. She is almost certainly lying about working fast food. Nobody who worked in fast food says, I did the fries. So she's lying about this. She's lying about it for no reason. Like, it's not like anybody would blame her or say she's unqualified if she didn't work in fast food. She's unqualified for a million other reasons, but that wouldn't be one of them. So there's no reason to lie about this, but she lies about everything. She's pathological. Here's one more clip, another classic Kamala ramble. And this is her response to a question about how she plans to lower housing costs. Here's what she says.
And assistance to state and local governments around transit dollars. And looking holistically at the connection between that and housing. And looking holistically at the incentives we in the federal government can create for local and state governments to actually engage in planning in a holistic manner that includes prioritizing affordable housing.
Holistically, you see. How's she going to lower housing prices? Well, holistically. How will she do it holistically? Simple. She'll do it holistically by approaching it holistically in a holistic manner with holistic strategies. So that holistically, a holistic result can be holistically achieved. In terms of being holistic, she's going to be very holistically. So Kamala just learned the word holistic and is very excited about it. I'm surprised it took her this long to latch on to this word. It's a perfect word for Kamala. It's a word that is wonderfully useful to people who want to sound like they're saying something when they're actually not saying anything at all. So we're going to hear this word a lot more. This is going to be the new Venn diagram. It's the new significance of the passage of time. She's going to be a word. She loves this word. This is the word for Kamala Harris. Except that it is always interesting to see how, she wants to say nothing while sound like she's saying something, but she's not good at that. She hasn't perfected that art. She says nothing and sounds like she's saying nothing. Barack Obama was good at saying nothing and making it sound like something. Even Hillary Clinton was relatively skilled in that department because it's a basic political skill that any corrupt politician needs to have. It's the first thing they teach you in corrupt politician school. It's you got to be able to your way through things. But Kamala didn't graduate that course. Here's maybe the most impressive. This is the glass ceiling that she's breaking if she ends up as president. She's maybe the first major party presidential candidate who isn't a good. And I'm trying to think of someone else that broke that ceiling before her, but I can't think of anyone. And this is why she's so terrified of interviews. It's not that she has no policies, no plan, that she's flip-flopped on every issue. Yeah, that's all true, but plenty of politicians and candidates have fallen into that category, right? And most of them are not afraid of interviews because they know they have the rhetorical skills to filibuster and obfuscate and and kind of just, dance around it and never actually answer a question. They know they can do that, and so it's no problem. Kamala doesn't have those skills, which actually would be admirable if she failed to develop skills because she's just such an honest, straight shooter, and so she doesn't know how to. All she knows how to do is just tell the truth. But she's not an honest, straight shooter. Obviously, she's totally full of it. She all the time. She's done it for decades, and yet she has never gotten any better at it. That's what amazes me. All right, New York City. This is from Daily Wire reporting. New York City Democrat Mayor Eric Adams has reportedly been indicted in the federal criminal corruption investigation that has cast a dark cloud over his administration for nearly a year. The New York Times reported that the indictment remains under seal, and it's unclear what charges he faces, but once it's unsealed, he'll be the first New York City mayor to be charged while in office. The investigation had initially centered around whether he conspired with the Turkish government to funnel illegal foreign contributions to his campaign in exchange for actions that he took as mayor. Investigators were also looking at whether he got free flight upgrades from an airline owned by the Turkish government. Prominent Democrats have already come out against him. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said in a statement, "I do not see how Mayor Adams could continue governing New York City. The flood of resignations and vacancies are threatening government function. Nonstop investigations will make it impossible to recruit and retain a qualified administration. For the good of the city, he should resign." Well, Adams has responded to this indictment in a statement, and here's a little bit of that.
My fellow New Yorkers, it is now my belief that the federal government intends to charge me with crimes. If so, these charges will be entirely false, based on lies. But they would not be surprising. I always knew that if I stood my ground for all of you, that I would be a target, and a target I became. For months, leaks and rumors have been aimed at me in an attempt to undermine my credibility and paint me as guilty. Just this past week, they searched the home of our new police commissioner, looking for documents from 20 years ago, just 1 week after he joined my administration. Enough. I will fight these injustices with every ounce of my strength and my spirit. If I'm charged, I know I am innocent. I will request an immediate trials so the New Yorkers can hear the truth. New Yorkers know my story.
Now, I have no idea what's going on here. I have no insight into it. Not a lot of analysis to offer. I'm more just covering it because it's a major story. And this is one of the things you notice, by the way, about the pundit class, of which I am still a part, unfortunately. But no matter what happens in the country or in the world, if it gets attention, if it's in the news, then we all automatically know exactly what's going on, right? We just immediately, I know what that's about. I'll tell you exactly why this is happening. Just heard about it 30 seconds ago, right? We haven't thought about Mayor Adams at all. Not following that, not really. But as soon as I know. I'll tell you why this is happening. I'll give you the real, and that's like what everybody does with this. I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. I have no clue. There are some conservatives who are saying that the feds are coming after Adams because he's been speaking out about the migrant problem. They're saying this is another witch hunt. Maybe that's true. Now, I'm hesitant to assume that, right? I'm hesitant to circle the wagons around a Democrat politician. It wouldn't shock me if Mayor Adams was actually corrupt and guilty of various crimes. Our ruling class is corrupt. Adams is part of the ruling class. I mean, he's the mayor of the largest city in the country. Democrats who run major cities are especially corrupt. So, when I hear that he's being indicted, I don't think, well, I can't. Not Mayor Adams. Not him. No, yeah, he could be. He could be guilty of all kinds of crimes. Who knows? Or not. Now, the timing is strange, I'll admit. Like, it's right before an election. Also, he is a Democrat, and so he's one of their own. So why are they going after him? Those are interesting questions. I don't know. There's probably more to the story than meets the eye. There usually is. And I think the safest assumption early on is that probably there are no good guys here. Probably as more comes out, you're going to say, okay, well, there's really nobody to root for in this thing, which is so often the case. Okay, let's get to something super cringe. The cast of Hamilton came together to make a Get Out the Vote song, which they are billing as a nonpartisan Get Out the Vote song, but it's quite obvious that it's very partisan indeed. And also, in terms of the artistic quality, it is predictably a travesty and a human rights violation that I'm now going to inflict on all of you. Here it is.
I say it's reproductive, so let my message be instructive. We've won each time, our rights were gambled, and we're picking reps who will persist. And if you call me a suffragist, then check the internet, cause here I'm a suffragist. Work! Look it up, check your status at whenweallvote.org. Look it up, check your status at whenweallvote.org. Next DM or text 3 friends to check for sure they are registered in the state or city they live now. Even better, you can show them how to register.
Yeah. So there's that. Nonpartisan, by the way. She's talking about reproductive rights. Totally nonpartisan. They'd be happy if you voted for Trump. They have no opinion about it. As expected, that was about a 9.5 on the cringe Richter scale, the Crichter scale, as it's known to scientists. And there are a couple of points worth making. Well, I don't know if they're worth making, but I'm going to do it anyway. First of all, this is once again why I am a proponent of decreasing voter participation. This is why I think there should be millions fewer who vote. If you're the kind of voter who could be inspired by this song to vote, like if this song actually succeeds in doing what it intends to do and convincing you to vote, then you are a voter who should actually be kept as far away from the polls as possible. Because you lack the intelligence and maturity to be given any say in how the country is governed. And there are many voters who fall into that category. And that's why, as I've argued so many times, there should be a system in place to filter out the people who are not qualified to participate in our democracy. Not everybody is. A simple civics test, 5th grade level, is what I've always suggested. 10-question quiz, very, very simple. It would immediately disqualify millions of the most incompetent voters in the country, and that'd be a very good thing. Voting is not a basic human right. It is not. Our founders never saw it that way. Nobody saw it that way until very recently. Voting is a serious responsibility, and we should expect voters to live up to the most basic standards if they're going to participate in it. And when you let the dumbest, most clueless, most immature, least invested people steer the ship, well, you end up hitting one iceberg after another, until the ship can't take it anymore. And that's what will happen. That's what is happening. And so to me, it's not much different from, driving. I think most people, unless you're a purist libertarian who doesn't even believe in driver's licenses, but most people understand that, you can't just let anybody on the road. There should be some standard before you let people drive. And most people would probably agree that the standards are too low right now. And if you go out and drive on the highway for 10 minutes, you see that. You see a bunch of people who it's like, you should not be here. You're not cut out for this. So even there's there are basic standards for driving. Even those basic standards, still you end up with millions of morons on the road who get people killed every day. Can you imagine if there were no standards? Can you imagine if they're like, yeah, anybody, whatever, you can drive. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter anything. You know, don't pass a test. Don't do anything. Don't pass go. Don't collect $200. Just go straight to the highway. Can you imagine how much worse it would be if we did that? And so if we can see that with driving, I don't see why it's so difficult to connect that dot with voting. Because the voting booth very much resembles now resembles the highway, only worse, where you've just got it crammed full of people who are not fit to be there. Second point, on a different note, no pun intended, back to the song, very corny, very cringe, very lame. We see again the left's artistic deficiencies on full display, which is a relatively new phenomenon. We've talked about it a lot, but they used to be very good at this kind of thing, like embedding their political and ideological message into art. They used to create things, whether it was music or TV shows or movies or whatever, where if you were perceptive, you could tell the political message that was in the piece of art, and maybe you didn't agree with it, but you couldn't help but listen to the song or watch the show or watch the film because it was so good. And this is how conservatives got good at separating the art from the artist and all that kind of stuff, because historically, you'd watch a show, you'd watch a movie, and you start seeing, okay, well, this is the political slant, this is the ideological slant, but this is a great film. And so I'm still going to watch it as a piece of art, and I'm going to try to overlook all that other stuff. But of course, most people in the audience were not perceptive enough to pick up on that stuff, and so they were absorbing the messages passively without knowing. And the art slowly changed them, slowly shifted their worldview without them even understanding what was happening. And that is when leftist art was most effective at doing what they wanted to do. But they've largely lost that ability now, because now it's always this sort of thing. It's on the nose, preachy, stuff that you could only enjoy if you agree with the message ahead of time. And that's a development that on balance is very positive. I'm actually happy. Well, it's a little bit of a, it's a you win some, you lose some situation, because it means that we have less art that's, any good. You have a lot more bad art out there, which is frustrating. But it also means that the left is not able to communicate their message nearly as effectively anymore, because this is how they do it. So, and everybody dies of cringe. You can't convert the audience when you've killed them from cringe. Are you still struggling with back taxes or unfiled returns? The IRS is escalating collections by adding 20,000 new agents and sending millions of demand letters. Handling this alone can be a huge mistake and cost you thousands of dollars in these challenging times. Your best offense is with Tax Network USA. With over 14 years of experience, the experts at Tax Network USA have saved clients millions in back taxes. Regardless of the size of your tax issue, their expertise is your advantage. Tax Network USA offers 3 key services: protection, compliance, and settlement. Upon signing up, Tax Network USA will immediately contact the IRS to secure a protection order, ensuring that aggressive collection activities such as garnishments, levies, or property seizures are halted. If you haven't filed in a while, if you need amended returns, or if you're missing records, Tax Network USA's expert tax preparers will update all of your filings to eliminate the risk of IRS enforcement. Then they'll create a settlement strategy to reduce or eliminate your tax debt. The IRS is the largest collection agency in the world, and now that tax season is over, collection season has begun. Tax Network USA can even help with state tax issues. For a complimentary consultation, call today at 1-800-958-1000 or visit the website at tnusa.com/Walsh. That's 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Walsh today. Don't let the IRS take advantage of you. Get the help you need with Tax Network USA. One of the most anticipated events of the 2024 election is coming to Daily Wire Plus on Tuesday night. The 2024 vice presidential debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz will be live right here. Let's face it, these debates are better with friends, especially friends who can spot every lie and false promise. That's why we're doing, A special backstage with pre-show analysis from Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Andrew Klavan, Jeremy Boring, and me. I cannot wait to sit around talking about the vice president debate. There's nothing more thrilling at all, nothing more thrilling than a vice presidential debate. I mean, I'm on the record loving vice president. I think it's like the Super Bowl for me, times 10. So instead of yelling at your TV alone, come yell with us. The vice presidential debate, Tuesday night at 8:30 Eastern Time on Daily Wire Plus. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. So recently on the show, we discussed the deep concern expressed by some Christian commentators about my new film, Am I Racist? These pundits are troubled by the film because they say we use deceptive tactics to capture the footage, and that is profoundly problematic, they say. They are disturbed. A Christian has made a movie that's interesting and funny and effective and that appeals to a wide audience, and this is, of course, a cause for great alarm among the sorts of Christians who want to make sure that we never do anything interesting, funny, or effective, especially if it appeals to a wide audience. No, what they want always are things that are lame and boring and redundant and, most of all, insular. And I've already addressed the arguments these people have made. I don't need to address it again, and yet here we are, because I happened to see a clip posted to Twitter by the account Woke Preacher Clips. This is a conversation on a podcast called Holy Post, hosted by Phil Vischer, best known as one of the creators of Veggie Tales. Vischer has gone woke in recent years, or maybe always was, I don't know, but it's no great surprise either way that he's apparently not a fan of mine. And he's joined on this episode by a guy named Pastor Mike Erie and another guy named Sky Jathani, who is now a Christian speaker, I guess, and was once also a pastor. So these three brilliant minds came together to talk about the film, a film that, as far as I can tell, none of them have seen. Let's listen.
The film lampoons diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and features Walsh posing as a DEI expert to expose and ridicule actual DEI experts in a Borat-style subterfuge. And if there's anything we need more in the Christian world, it's Borat-style subterfuge.
Now, I'm going to let them continue, but I do want to interject here to say that, yeah, actually, Phil, we do need more of that in the Christian world. Comedy, satire, using the left's own methods against them. That is, without question, something we need more of. But these three men disagree, so let's get to their argument. Even though they didn't see the movie and haven't the slightest damn clue what they're even talking about, still, let's continue.
We don't know who's right, but it sparked a conversation online among Christians saying, is that okay? And Denny Burke wrote a piece. Actually, I was reading from Denny Burke's piece, who's the head of the Center for Biblical Womanhood and Manhood, so ultra-conservative. But he pushed back and said, I think it's wrong to use subterfuge and deception just, for culture war battles. And other people said, oh, what, do you think it's wrong to lie to the Nazis that you've got Jews in your attic?
I knew that was coming.
These are serious times. It warrants serious measure. So you both are one current and one former pastor. I want you to tell me, when is it okay for me to lie to achieve what I consider to be a good? Mike Erie, go.
Well, I'm lying that I'm enjoying this.
I want to interject one more time briefly before we hear them make their compelling case against the movie they didn't watch. I just want you to notice the tone. You see the guy on the bottom left? I think that's Sky, with his head in his hands, rolling his eyes. Pastor Erie is flippant and dismissive. So is Phil Vischer, the Veggie Tales guy. The whole thing is so beneath them. It's just so silly. It's absurd that they're even lowering themselves to discuss my film. That's the general tone which pervades all the rest of what we're about to hear and what came before the clip we just played. It's also the attitude that these types of people usually have when discussing me or my work. But notice something. They're discussing my work. I'm now discussing them discussing my work, but I'm not discussing any of their work. Nobody is. Nobody's discussing it. And that's because they haven't done anything remotely worth discussing in their entire lives. They haven't done anything at all. Now, Vischer made Veggie Tales 30 years ago, which is fine. That was a successful series about singing vegetables. And whatever. It's something, though, at least. These other two, and Vischer himself, post Veggie Tales, haven't done anything, ever, to move or impact the culture in any way. They hang out in their pretentious, woke, pseudo-Christian bubble, smelling their own farts and telling themselves how much smarter and more nuanced and more sophisticated they are. But they don't do anything. They don't create anything. Instead, they spend their time dismissively critiquing the only people who are actually doing and creating things. And look, I'm used to having useless people criticize me. It happens every day. But when they do it with such a snide attitude, that's what annoys me. So here's my challenge as we continue to any of the three dudes in that podcast. Challenge. Go out and create something. Anything at all that makes a noticeable and positive cultural impact. Now, I don't mean something that your liberal Christian friends like, okay? I mean something that moves the culture in some way. Something that people outside of your bubble have to sit up and take note of and grapple with and think about. Something that makes a little bit of ripple, has a bit of a ripple effect on the surface of the water. Make anything that achieves that. Could be a song, a movie, a show, even a podcast. Not the one you're currently on, that has zero impact. Nobody watches it. But just anything at all that makes an impact. That's my challenge. And I would suggest that if you can't do that, if you can't even conceive of how to go about doing that, well, then you should probably have a little humility and wipe the smarmy smirks off your faces. Because not only that, but you aren't even qualified to hold the positions you currently hold. You should not be in a self-appointed position of Christian leadership or as a supposed Christian thought leader or whatever if you actually don't know how to effectively spread a message of truth and fight back against evil in modern culture. If you don't know how to do that, then all you should be doing, fellas, is sitting and listening, not talking to an audience. Because you don't have anything worthwhile to say. And you don't have an example that anybody would benefit from following. But maybe I'm being harsh. So let me now take my own advice and continue listening to them so that we can find out if they do in fact have something worthwhile to say. Let's continue.
This was the kicker from Matt Walsh, because Matt Walsh pushed back and said, I have no regrets about the methods we used and would happily do it again. And then he added, the real dividing line is between those of us who are willing to do what it takes to win the culture war and those of us who are not.
Oh. Yep. That is the dividing line. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. That is exactly the dividing line. That is very true.
So you agree. You're going on record to say you agree with Matt Walsh.
In one very narrow respect, you cannot follow the Sermon on the Mount and engage in a culture war. Yes, so there is a dividing line, absolutely. So there is this, principle in Judaism about what it is when you save a life, you save the world, and so to deceive in order to protect life, I mean, I'm all for it. To deceive in order to own the libs, may it never be, Phil. May it never be.
And let's be clear, it's not just deceive to own the libs, it's deceive to own the libs that in a movie that you will make millions of dollars distributing. Mm-hmm. So there is a self-interest in here. There's a financial interest
in
this.
It's deceiving for entertainment value.
Exactly.
Because there are a whole bunch of other ways that you could make a point that you disagree with diversity, equity, and inclusion programs.
Right.
Other than making fun of the people who promote them for money.
I think that it's not just about lying, and it's not just about this movie, obviously. This is the ethic that animates so much of the Christian subculture right now. It is, if you inflate the fear that everything is on the line. The world is going to burn. The country is going to be destroyed. The churches are going to be taken over. Your children are going to be, forced out of school to have a sex change operation, whatever. Like, these are things that are being told to people. If everything is on the line, then it justifies abandoning the way of Jesus in order to do what's necessary to save yourself and those you love.
Here.
And that's what he's saying is
that's right.
It's wrong on so many levels.
If you have to set aside the commands of Jesus in order to fulfill what you think is Jesus' agenda, we can be sure it's no longer Jesus you're following.
So there's a lot there, all of it bad. It is a confused, morally and theologically incoherent stew of nonsense. And it's coming from exactly the sort of weak, ineffectual, uninspired, utterly useless, limp-wristed, spineless, little mealy-mouthed, empty vessels who have all but destroyed the Christian church in the West. And that's why I get a little heated about this. It's not because I'm defending the movie. The movie doesn't need defense. It's doing great. The audience response has been overwhelmingly positive. Certainly not worth getting upset about the opinions of these three guys nobody cares about. What upsets me is that these three guys and the legions of Christian, quote-unquote, leaders just like them have done catastrophic damage to the body of Christ. And that damage can best be summarized by the statement from the man on the bottom right of the screen, Pastor Erie. It was a statement enthusiastically co-signed by the other two. And if I wanted to sum up all of the problems that we're having, that Western Christendom is having, I couldn't do it better than what that guy just said. He said, and I quote, "You can't follow the Sermon on the Mount and engage in a culture war." That very concisely summarizes the effeminate, castrated form of Christianity that has invaded the Christian church like a parasite. And it could not possibly be more wrong. I mean, you might as well say that you can't be a good boxer if you know how to throw a punch. It is a statement that misses the point so much as to be basically unintelligible. It is a wrongness so wrong that it induces stroke symptoms in those who encounter it. No, Pastor. Let me clear this up for you. You can't follow the Sermon on the Mount unless you engage in the culture war. Do not light a candle and put it under a bushel. Let your light shine before men. That's what Jesus tells us in the Sermon on the Mount. And that is the culture war. It is being a light, a flame, a torch of truth in the darkness. What do you think a culture war is? Let's break this down. I'll try to make it as simple as possible for you guys, because I know that you are not very quick to pick up on things. Culture itself is nothing less than everything that makes up society. Our institutions, our traditions, our customs, our art, our collective achievements, everything that defines our society, that is the culture. The culture war, therefore, is the fight over that. Nearly every aspect of our society, of our culture, is now controlled and defined by an ideology that not only denies but aggressively militates against Christian values and Christian teaching. It is an ideology that embraces and promotes debauchery, relativism, self-worship, hedonism, nihilism, an ideology that celebrates the mass slaughter of the unborn, an ideology that seeks to inflame resentment, suspicion, and hostility between different races, which is what our movie deals with. An ideology that instills deep confusion in children so they don't even understand who they are, what they are. An ideology that, yes, castrates and sterilizes children, which is what our last movie dealt with. Now, we want to stop that. We want to defeat that ideology and install Christian values in its place. The other option is to surrender. So tell me, Pastor, which part of the Sermon on the Mount calls for us to surrender to evil? Where did you see that? Can you quote me a chapter and verse on that one? What's the part that tells us that we're too good? We need to be too good and too sophisticated to worry about evil. Little things like that. You know, what I see when I read the scriptures are continued relentless calls to fight evil not lie down and acquiesce to it. But you know all of that, don't you? See, people like you pretend to be too good for the culture war. You stick up your nose and act like you're above it all. But in reality, you are yourself actively fighting a culture war. You're fighting one right now. All three of you in that video were fighting a culture war in the video itself. It's just that you're fighting on the other side. Trying to convince us not to fight is a battle tactic that you are employing. You are employing it on behalf of the side that despises Christian values, Christian teaching, and the truth of the gospel. And sadly, this tactic has been very effective up to this point. But I think that's starting to change now, finally. Because we see you people for what you really are and what you're really doing and who you're really aligned with. And that is why you are all today very much with a vengeance canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day. Godspeed.
The stage is set. The stakes are sky high. Senator Vance, Governor Walz, face off. But who will land the knockout punch? Don't watch the debate alone. Experience it with the most trusted names in conservative media. Daily Wire Backstage brings you unfiltered commentary, biting wit, and expert analysis you won't get anywhere else. Join Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Clavin, and Jeremy Boring for a debate night you'll never forget. Daily Wire Backstage, Tuesday, October 1st, 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 Central, only on Daily Wire Plus.